Business unusual. Hi everybody, how you doing? Good afternoon, good evening, good day, good morning, wherever you at. Thank you for making some more time for my chit chat. I hope I prick you more than I tickle you. So yeah, ideas born again this week from my interactions. I'm going to try and keep it very, very civil because I'm toying with some Dave Chappelle level kind of intelligence here. Oh my God. Oh. Yeah, so yeah, I've really thought about this and I was going to do this over the weekend, but I just decided let me do it and get this off my chest. Otherwise, I'll keep dreaming of it. So, business unusual. There's a normal way of doing everything, which is usual processes. But then there's always a time when you have to change stuff. Right? Like I've told you guys already, I work in quality. So basically, it's just seeing that what we agreed on is how we're doing things. And where there's a need actually to change. But when you work with production, they always find ways to do things either way to then just finish their targets. So there's a lot of unusual business going on. And they'll prefer that people in quality don't find out. But, that's sort of the background. So usual business processes or usual way of doing things always guarantees results. Huh? Maybe let's just do a bit of definition. Huh? It's business usual. Business as usual is normal, typical, routine. The things that we're used to. In my language, you say chijairire, things that we're used to, the way things are. You want to fry an egg, you're gonna put a pan there, put a bit of oil, heat it up, break the egg, put it there, flip it over a couple of times, and that's it. Maybe you can fry an egg by just heating the pan, putting the egg, and then putting the oil afterwards. That's business unusual. Okay, so it's what guarantees the way things are done, and it's sort of what shapes our world. So that means there's routine, standard, and then ongoing operations of how things go. Whatever you do, whether it's faith, whether it's so it gives you the outcome. The things are the way they are because there's a usual or a familiar way to doing things. Okay, but business unusual, it's not a bad thing at all. It has its oversights. Normally, it actually brings in a lot of development. It means we're learning the situation, or the situation is now, or call them circumstances, are now permitting that things are done otherwise. Things are a bit unusual. But when it comes to usual business processes or usual way of doing things, it's repetitive. You achieve consistency. So you can almost tell what the result is. Not even tell, you can actually know what you're supposed to have as a result. So you've got a desirable outcome. So you keep doing that, you keep getting the same result. It's maintained that way. There's no outliers. Huh? Come in little punks like me. That's too warm. That's too high. That's what it does. So it can be in anything, man. But it creates departments that, even from a personal perspective, society perspective, that bring everything together to maintain a norm. Okay? So there's actually a purpose, a frame in their results. There's obviously risks, man. Doing things as business as usual, it probably does not create new opportunities. It can actually lead to the death of anything you're doing, or irrelevance, redundancy. It's like, you keep doing this. People like me, you keep doing gym all the time. You should try maybe quitting the alcohol, man, and maybe the tummy will go. So for me, business as usual, when it comes to fitness, I go to the gym, I swim and whatever. I'm yet to work on my diet. I tried for 30 days. I didn't see nothing. And I just went back to the same thing, and hence I'm still looking the same. So let me go a bit further and just say, it's business as usual defines completion. that this is complete. This is done. Business Unusual discovers opportunities for new ways to complete things, or hidden germs, or prospective gains and things like this. And basically, it's, if I was to define this it's Business Unusual is embracing fundamental non-routine changes. Like, you are accepting that things can be otherwise, but it's always a shock to the system. It's shock, like I said the last time. So it is not always a welcome thing. In as much as in today's world there's a lot of progression, it's probably what research and development does, or testing the limits brings, but it's always just new ways of working, a shift from traditional methods. It calls for a lot of things: speed, agility, collaboration. Yeah, a little bit of collaboration sometimes, but then innovation, definitely. It's innovative because you're trying to I don't know, use your shoes for a pillow. Maybe it makes you stop snoring, but this is not like conventional. Oh, what is it? The end result is that your bed is going to stink. It's going to have feet all over, but you'd have slept well, and the sleep is silent, probably. There's a lot of experiment. Now, a lot of experiment in Business Unusual sometimes becomes the formula or the way to do things. So you might exceed a limit, and then it's like, oh, okay, we can live with that. But then you're blind to the immediate germination of possible risks or dangers thereon. Okay, it also requires a lot of fast learning because it's quick adjustment. So you're trying to stay in the norm, but you're trying to go with the new wind, so to speak. But there's a lot of ethical issues involved because there has to be a code. I mean, we've got statutory instruments, we've got norms, we've got standards. Normally, Business Unusual means that there's a compromise on these, and the police of the day that says no, people like me again, they then come into certain positions where they are in a disagreement because of ethical breaches and so forth. So there's for the most part in the general world, there's social inclusion, environmental diversity in all its forms, transparency. I think, what's that thing again? Integrity is another thing, which is a big thing. In the world that requires the thirst for money, integrity is very much compromised when it comes to Business Unusual. It's an afterthought. Take, for example, what we're having now with AI. You start wanting to think, isn't there like somewhere they can just switch the machine off? But it's looking like a lot of integrity and ethics are being trodden. I was telling someone that, at the end of the day, when I look at my kids, a business as usual is I want them to have good grades, go through the grades that they're supposed to and everything. But the reality is that you don't need to learn anything. You just need to know the tools that solve the problem now, So I look at some of the jobs that there are, the big changes that have happened. People that knew, if you do this, study this, you do this, you'd find that, the whole quantum technology is solving big problems. Things that you never thought would be done by ghosts are just happening, To the very mechanics of how computers and stuff function, they're now doing it themselves. The computers are doing things to themselves to get things done. They are making the pots to happen. If you know, you know. So there's a lot of stakeholder trust that's also involved, when you do business differently. So that means there's going to be a lot of disgruntled people. There's always dangers to business being done unusually. There's a lot of failures, trial and error issues. What the hell is that? Error. Organizational and cultural resistance. This is where it's largest. So it's at some point, if the resource is there to counter, the resistance, things do happen. You can't control it. I'll use AI again. They've got power to just keep going. Even if you say this is unethical, they are cloning beings with animals to get organs, and if you don't have the money to stop it, you can only be disgruntled. There's risks, there's a lot of losses, and then there's obviously a lot of strategic misalignment because at the end of the day, what the entire frame was supposed to be, what it's becoming, because things are unusual, is another thing. It brings a lot of challenge and a lack of clear direction and strategy eventually, you know. There's also a lack of skills. It's assumed that business unusual, it might be a bright spark, but there isn't enough skills to actually sustain. Therefore, it becomes disruptive, or it can cave in at some point. So when you look at it, it just removes things from a way of doing things. Is it good or bad? I wouldn't know. I think in essence, like anything, it is productively good for the future, new methodology and everything, but it is unfortunately wearing on the secure position that we've always had in anything, you know. So there's that risk of throwing baby out with the water, you know. Just you're excited about something and then you just lose it. You just don't notice it. You think, oh, let's get that, you know, house, and then you chuck this out, and then before you know, oh my goodness, you know, we hadn't thought of this. That's the problem with like having business unusual. A lot of jeopardy, you know. It can also just, you know, poor fitness and quality comes in. Why do I keep saying quality? And then there can actually be a loss in intellectual property, because new things replace old things. And before you know it, nobody knows how to do the things of old. I'm really avoiding a certain example. I don't agree, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's a leadership and follower. And normally with the business unusual, it affects the position of those that are in charge. Because what puts them in charge, or whoever is a significant position, is there by design of what the modus operandi states. So business unusual probably compromises the existence of a certain a human resource that is finding safety in their position. So creating new things can either render certain stature as obsolete. That's one of the reasons why you get a lot of resistance. So as you'd say, you'd go to school, you progress, you want to end up as a managing director or head of department. But if that department doesn't exist, if invoicing department doesn't exist because you bring in software, the head of invoicing will be like, no, we don't need this data protection and all these things, and they'll try and resist. But does not necessarily mean that having, for lack of a better description, computerized system and taking away a paperless system is not a bad thing. The thing is, it's disrupting things. It could have its negatives, but overly, it's actually, so the resistance you're going to face, normally it's an HR thing. Even in society, it's a human resource thing. But there's also negative exposure to it. So, but basically, one of how I probably can, I want to say this, you know, so we wrap it up on this, the two opposites. There's a plus and minus to anything, but then the minus to business unusual is that it proceeds with a lot of holes and opportunities for disaster, oversights, too many blind spots, and there's a skills shortage sometimes because you're coming up with ideas that have not been mastered in methodologies that have got no one to man them. That's why business as usual would prefer things to stay that way. But business unusual, there's something it does, okay? It creates absence, right? It's a new idea. And absence, as a way of, in its sense, in its essence, creates a sense of opposing relevance, okay? So how do I'm just trying to find my words. Okay, so let's just say this. I think absence creates opposing relevance by a lack, or maybe call it a void, into an inactive, meaningful presence. This is twisted. Yeah, that's what it does. So, you know, so basically the significance of what is missing is often highlighted, or it is intensified, or it actually provokes a counterpart. In a way, it establishes dynamic and contrasting relevance. So let's say, if you had a laptop, you know, and you left it on a table, or a fruit or something like that, and then when you come back and it's not there, somebody took it, that's the assumption, the absence is only relevant because of the strong memory you've held of the apples or laptops present on the table. You get it? So the opposite becomes very apparent. You all of a sudden see that how big this table is, so you start thinking maybe it's under or whatever. So the table hasn't grown any bigger. What's missing is just the laptop or the app or the apple, So there's perception of a void is you'd almost try to think, okay, maybe I shouldn't have left it on the table. It's not the table's fault. The table's always been there. It's just that putting the laptop on the table without a secure cable or not putting your apple in your lunchbox or backpack would have kept it in place. This is what happens. So this is the challenge of that I want to say. It's like population dynamics. Okay, there's a lot of immigrants in a lot of places, and very undesirable. To which I'm one. But the reason why they're there is because there's space for them somehow, whether it's skills-based or whatever. But over and above, what most people don't understand is that immigrants are a desirable function for most economies because they ignite something called consumption, okay, on services, goods, and all these things. That's why all these. So you might, if your conduct is no longer as per business as usual, what people used to do, like. And then you result in low birth rates and stuff like this. It doesn't mean the immigrants are having more babies. No, it just means you're not having enough babies. And the immigrants sort of just keep doing the same thing. They're starting families as usual, as they always do. They're popping babies 3, 4. But if you're okay living alone with your dog and it's 3 of you in your family, you guys are all above 40, and you're well-resourced, well-educated, but all you have is a couple of pets or nothing at all and a bicycle. And then comes an immigrant like me, I bring in 4 babies. It's not like I make a lot of babies. I'm just doing what we've always done. And I cannot understand why you're that old and you don't have kids. I'm not saying get married, but I'm just thinking, So that's the thing. So if the absence of one thing does not translate the increase on another, okay, it doesn't mean that. So that's one of the risks of doing things differently. So in doing business unusual, which I'm very fond of because I'm a value addition person. I don't think everything needs to stay the same, but I do believe that pimping something should be mindful of the function. So if you're going to put rims in your car, the car should move. You can't make them square. And as much as they'll look nice or triangle, if you're going to make them triangle, you have to make sure that there's got to be some round part that's going to be moving. So maybe it's just the shape in the middle, okay? But if you make square wheels and expect to keep getting benefits of your large horsepower, then it's not going to work. You have to understand that you now have square wheels. So doing business unusually comes with a lot of care. And one of the things that you would have to consider is not to forget or be aware of the blind spot that business as usual will place in bold light, because business unusual forgets to do those things that way. So if it's a business, a new business, expenditure-wise, you're going to spend more money on lights for your garden because you think the plants are going to grow faster or whatever it is. When your electric bill comes, okay, and your electricity costs more, it is not to say the electricity is now of a higher price. No, you're just using more of it, okay? Or if you're having power shortages elsewhere, now your refrigerator doesn't work well because you have to cut it out for the sake of this, and then now you can't charge your phone, you can't watch TV because all the little power that you have has to go to the plants. It doesn't mean that it's not the TV's fault. Neither is it the refrigerator's fault. It's the fact that you decided to light up your plants. This is really twisted. But I think, without saying much, I think we're not mindful of the desire that drives business unusual. It's a very selfish position. It is not. It's never really communal, because when you look at the interviews, like what's that guy, the Amazon guy, when he was talking about selling books online, people were laughing. I always watch his interviews, and I think I saw the Bill Gates one when he's talking about computers and how some people, and then came in Steve Jobs with the iPod, that music would now be in your pocket streaming. It always sounded crazy, but it's a very selfish position. It's got very conflicting goals, and there's an over-reliance on external trends as well, more than what's happening on the inside. And then there's perfectionism, which is very individual, because you have to deny the corruption by norm, okay? But in doing that, we should not forget, how absence of the norm can create opposing relevance. So most things, like in your life, if you're doing things any differently, the things that you are avoiding to take care of, or you choose to ignore, will become a lot more apparent because they're not being attended to, or they can proceed. If you choose to exist outside the system, the remainder of what you're ignoring does not immediately die. It may actually exist without you. And your shortcomings in your new way of doing things can become so challenged by the process of norm for you to prove your position. You might assume that the norm is fighting your existence, but no, you are actually fighting yourself. So in that case, when business unusual is at the mercy of business as usual, then it is rather obsolete, in my opinion. Business unusual should be able to gain relevance only if it adds value to business as usual. If your business unusual is at the mercy of business as usual, okay? If the new is at the mercy of the old, the new is probably not relevant. It's probably maybe ahead of its time. Some will say avant-garde or whatever, must say this stuff. Huh? So this is how I look. I don't know, you can debate on it, but I think everything within reasonable limits, because you cannot be unusual and fight the usual. The unusual aspect to which would be value addition should improve on the usual. If it's in contradiction, then it probably isn't necessary. If it is supportive and illuminating on the other end, then it's vital. That's one point. The absence of anything within a new form of doing things always creates opposing relevance. So it's not the table that is growing. It's your laptop that's missing. Have a good day.